was created for you by a collaboration between the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault and the Colorado Coalition for Restorative Justice Practices, CCASA and CCRJP, which will be highlighted during the Sharing Circle session. We're really excited to highlight the work that we've all been doing for many years now. And this policy circle is also brought to you in partnership with the Colorado State Restorative Justice Council. In restorative justice circle process, we start and end with a reading or some other type of clear demarcation. This helps us engage in a conversation a little bit differently than maybe we normally would. It helps ground us in a different way of being. And so, to that end, this is a reading from Adrienne Marie Brown, Fables and Spells, and the reading is entitled Radical Gratitude Spell. A spell to cast upon meeting a stranger, comrade, or friend working for social and/or environmental justice and liberation. You are a miracle in motion. I greet you with wonder in a world which seeks to own your joy and your imagination. You have chosen to be free every day as a practice. I can never know the struggles you went through to get here, but I know you have swum upstream and at times it has been lonely. I want you to know I honor the choices you made in solitude, and I honor the work you have done to belong. I honor your commitment to that which is larger than yourself and your journey to love the particular vessel of life that is you. You are enough. Your work is enough. You are needed. Your work is sacred. You are here, and I am grateful. We are grateful. Thank you so much for your presence today. Presence is so deeply important to this work of restorative justice. So today's circle is about restorative approaches to policymaking. As noted already, this session will be recorded and available to the public, and that's really important for us to note because as Amelia and Casey already explained during their session earlier today, or if you weren't able to make that, confidentiality is a really important value to this work. And so when we are creating spaces that may not be confidential, we want to be very clear about making sure you all know that. Restorative justice is not just about justice. It is not just contained within the criminal legal system. It is a set of values and practices that can be applied in nearly any context. Similarly, policymaking is not just done at our Capitol by politicians. Policymaking happens every day in so many different ways. It could be a meeting over coffee between old friends. It could be a CCASA board meeting where we have really tough decisions to make because federal funding has completely been gutted, right? These are the obstacles that we are facing constantly. And so the premise of this year's policy circle is all about how we consider policymaking through a restorative justice lens, through restorative justice values and transformative justice values, and how we uplift those in the content of the work that we do, as well as in the practices we employ when we work with one another. Today, we've already opened our circle. We'll be putting in pieces throughout the WUVA chat about circle process if you're interested. In a minute, we'll shift to introductions, and Shannon will go into greater depth to set up today's purpose. Amelia will go into a little greater depth about our guidelines for today and circle keeping generally. Then we'll move into our sharing circle and hear from the folks who are doing the work on the ground at both the local, or excuse me, all three, local coalition building, statewide coalition building in Colorado, as well as national coalition building. All really important work to highlight how we can be doing this in all sorts of spaces that maybe you had not conceived of previously. Finally, we'll move, well, not finally, but at some point we'll move to our listening circle and hear from our leaders, our policy leaders, about the ideas they have, having listened to the sharing circle folks and their practices and challenges and wins and successes. We'll move to the reflection circle, which includes everyone. All of you who are on this session today are invited to reflect on what you have heard, as well as what ideas you have for transforming this world. It is really important for us to recognize our collective power in numbers, and so that is part of the purpose of our reflection circle. And finally, we'll close out the circle with gratitude to everyone who is here and commit to things that we are going to do to practice restorative justice and transformative justice values in our everyday lives, and maybe even in our workplaces, as well as the service work that we are so committed to doing. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing your circle keepers for today. I am Liz Porter Merrill, she or they pronouns. I was a warrior in the State Public Defender's Office Appellate Division for about a decade and transitioned to restorative justice about 8 years ago now. I will be your primary keeper for the sharing circle, and restorative justice is deeply important to me and everything I do, particularly how I raise my child and my kiddo. And the core value that guides my work, it's not always present, but it's aspirational in a practice, is I really want to be grounded in love in everything I do, rather than fear, as so common in our culture. So my core value for my work is love. Shannon Sleva is the primary circle keeper today for the listening circle. She is a professor at the University of Denver's Graduate School of Social Work, where her research and teaching focuses on understanding restorative and collaborative justice policies. And then last but certainly not least, Ms. Amelia Gentile Matthew is the primary keeper for the reflection circle today. She is an organizer, an advocate, and an educational designer. She supports the work of CCASA to expand options for restorative practice for survivors. She was previously based in campus peer-to-peer response, support advocacy, psychology, first aid, response teams work, has done so many things. Amelia and Shannon, two of my very dear friends who really inspire me to do better at this work every single day. Thank you so much for joining me in this adventure, and I can't wait for you all to be part of this policy circle today. I'll pass it over to Shannon.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. This is Shannon speaking from the interpreters. So I just want to talk to you a little bit more about what restorative justice is and what is this thing that you signed up for today of the policy circle. As Liz started to touch on, restorative justice is not just a way of bringing responsible and harmed people together in the criminal legal system, which is how a lot of people think of it, but it's a broader paradigm and a set of practices that recognizes our innate interconnectedness, emphasizes the importance of authentic relationship to preventing and repairing harm, and that really focuses on truth telling and deep listening as ways to get to our collective wisdom about what needs to happen next. And circle practice is a key format for this. You have to imagine it a little as you're here today, because imagine that we're all sitting in a circle, not only one circle, but 3 concentric circles, as I'll show you in a moment. And the circle is a shape that humans often gather in, have gathered in throughout time, that helps us to see each other clearly, to take turns speaking and listening and to understand each other's needs more deeply. And I think some folks are putting some more resources in the chat for you if you want to understand more about restorative practice. So a policy circle is a way of drawing on this restorative worldview. And Liz, you can switch to the next slide if you want. That centers around the idea of circle, and it involves 3 concentric circles. So you might imagine that we have a small circle sitting in the middle, in the very center, another circle around that, and then the bigger circle around that of everyone listening. In a policy circle, the center circle is designed to center those who are directly impacted or who have a particular story to share that we want to listen to. So today's sharing circle includes those that are working in restorative justice and intimate violence spaces to try and influence local, state, or national policy. And you're going to get to hear their stories of what they've been working on and how that is happening for them. The next circle, the yellow one in this dialogue, is what we call the listening circle. And in the policy circle, the listening circle gives full attention to the experiences of those that are in the field and that are impacted, to witness their stories, to listen deeply to them, and to try and derive further collective insights across them. So today's listening circle includes stakeholders who are decision makers, organizers, lawmakers, or other leaders in policy spaces. And then the biggest circle is everyone else who's in this room. That includes a couple dozen other people right now. And that is a supportive audience that's committed to contemplating and reflecting on what they hear and the broader implications of the dialogue. We also want to acknowledge that each of these circles has what we call an empty chair in it. And sometimes we depict that physically in a circle. And the empty chair is just a way to acknowledge and honor the voices of people who couldn't be here today or who weren't connected with our particular network, or whose voices just should be present in this story but aren't present today. So just acknowledging there's even more wisdom to share. The last thing that I want to talk about is just some of the values and themes that the organizing committee thought about as we grounded ourselves in planning this circle. And these are some of the guideposts of restorative practice. So these involve things like the importance of moving at the speed of trust, demonstrating respect for each other, recognizing our interdependence and our need to collaborate on solutions that benefit all of us, and really embracing an abundance mindset. So believing that we can create solutions that benefit the whole without compromising the needs of specific people in the group. These are themes that we think and hope that you'll hear more about today and that might come up across the circles. So I'm going to pass it off to Amelia to talk about how we bring these kind of philosophies into practice through the guidelines of the circle.
Yeah, this is Amelia speaking. Thank you so much, Shannon. So this will probably look very familiar to folks who are attending this conference and this circle, because there's a lot of shared values across the survivor support and advocacy field, as well as the restorative practitioners field. A couple guidelines that we are extending to all 3 concentric circles today: the sharing circle, the listening circle, and all of you joining us on Whova for the conference in the reflection circle. We have guidelines for conduct, how we engage one another so that we can have consistency, support when we are working together and coming together in a circle space. So this is sort of how the philosophy of RJ is actually enacted through specific agreements. So the folks you'll be hearing from today, as well as anything you share in the chat with us and with one another, we ask you to speak from the heart, and also to listen from the heart, meaning understanding everyone is sort of speaking from the place they're at, from their understanding, their background, their identities, and that's also how we come to listen. So bringing as much as we can sort of gratitude and understanding. I sometimes call it a learning mindset as well, because everybody has something that we can learn from when we're working together, to understand each other and ourselves better. Also, for the folks who are sharing in the space, trust that you know what to say and say just enough. What is said stays, what is learned may leave. That is generally true. Of course, as Liz has mentioned, something unusual about this particular circle today is that it will be posted to share with other folks, but typically that's not the case. And still, it's always good to utilize anything we have learned and frame it in our voice, rather than sort of saying what somebody else said or sort of speaking for them. So take the learnings and then digest them for ourselves and share more widely. And that is certainly an invitation for anybody participating in a circle space as well. And everyone always has the right to pass. Consent is a very important value in restorative spaces, so everyone can pass. You're definitely, especially in the outer circles, welcome to just listen and learn today, but we also want to make sure that you have an ability to participate, so we'll be putting some information and invitations in the Whova chat for you to introduce yourselves and share along the way as well. All of this culminates to respecting the talking piece in the virtual space. That's how we communicate across each other. And lastly, a reminder to me and to everybody to speak relatively slowly and clearly for one another as well as for the interpreters. And then, yeah, there will be invitations in the chat for the reflection circle in a moment as well. Anything I missed, Shannon or Liz, for guidelines?
You did fabulous, Amelia. Thank you. So we're going to introduce our sharing circle, folks. They will each have a 1 minute to share their introduction, a little bit about themselves, as well as their core value, what that guides their work, like I did for myself and then neglected to do for poor Amelia and Shannon. I put it in the chat so we all are on the same page with our core values. But sharing circle folks, if you'll come on screen, that would be fabulous. And we'll give you 1 minute. Shannon is going to give you a little warning when your time is almost up. It's going to be an hourglass symbol. And then I think we have a chime. Yep, there's your hourglass symbol when your time is running short. And then so finish up. And I think there's a chime to mark the end of the time. Is that correct, Shannon?
Sorry, can you hear the chime, Liz?
We could not hear the chime. Okay.
Can you hear it now? Okay, maybe I might have to, I'm not sure if it can compete with people talking.
We'll figure out another.
Well, look, it might be me going bong. We'll figure it out. There will
Part
be,
of RJ is
so I'll give
adapting.
you the little hourglasses and a hand whenever you have like 10 or 15 seconds left, and then there will be a little chime for you. You don't have to cut off mid-sentence, but just finish your sentence and pass to the next person.
Thank you, Shannon. So then I am going to start by offering the invitation verbally. We'll put it in the chat as well. Our introduction round invitation is, please share your name, how you want to be addressed, what group or organization you're with, and a core value that guides your work related to collaborative policy making. And I am very pleased to pass the talking piece off to our first chair, Ames.
Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Ames Stenson. I use pronouns they, them, theirs. And I am the program manager for the City of Inglewood's Municipal Court Restorative Justice Program. I also have the pleasure and privilege of being a founding and current board member for the Restorative Rainbow Alliance, along with my colleagues Rami Aharib and Laura Beth Waltz, and also have the great privilege of being the ex officio board member, president of the Colorado Coalition for Restorative Justice Practices. And there's so many values that guide my work, but the one I would say today is integrity. If I'm not grounded in myself and my own values and how I want to show up, I don't know how to serve and be in working position and building relationships with other people. Glad to be here. Sorry, and I'll pass it to Chelsea.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. My name is Chelsea Holmes. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns, and I like when people switch back and forth between the two and don't just call me she, her all the time. I'm the program director of Queer Futures, which is an LGBTQIA2S+ resource center that serves all ages in the Yampa Valley, which is Routt and Moffat counties up in Northwest Colorado. I was previously the director of Advocates of Routt County, which is the domestic violence sexual assault advocacy org, just kind of how I got involved with this. And if I had to pick one core value, I would say that it's empowerment. It's integral to everything that I do at Queer Futures. I'm always trying to kind of empower folks to come together to identify a problem and then work together to solve it and demystify that process.
Thank you, Chelsea. I'm going to pass it to Heidi next.
Hi, my name is Heidi Cardenas. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Restorative Denver case manager, and I work for a nonprofit called the Conflict Center. And we have a partnership with the Denver District Attorney's Office that offers a community-based restorative justice alternative to the traditional criminal legal system. So today I'm kind of coming into this space, and when I'm thinking about values, a value that came to me was thinking through agency. And so really just kind of thinking about how empowering the person harmed and the person who caused harm to have that agency to decide how they think that harm should be repaired. What does harm look like in terms of repair and accountability? And I will pass it to, I think, Casey.
Thank you. I always feel like I should take it from the side when we do things virtually. My name is Casey Ballinger. I use she, her pronouns. I am happy to be referred to as Casey. I am the Sexual Assault Response Program Manager at the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I'm also a restorative justice practitioner in the field. I help support at CCASA our restorative justice and transformative justice programming in collaboration with Amelia. I support our programming around justice-involved survivors in addition to the programming for the post-conviction victim advocacy space. The value I would say that I am bringing today and that I always bring into policy work would be curiosity. I think it's incredibly helpful for me to sometimes take a step back and understand the different perspectives that may be coming into the room and the different lived experiences or backgrounds or professional fields that folks are coming with as we enter into discussion about different changes we may be making in the communities that we live and work in. I'm going to pass to Lynn.
Hello, I'm Lynn Lee, she, her. I have been working in restorative justice for about 25 years. And I live in El Paso County, but I work around the state in restorative justice. I am part of CCRJP and also sat on the State Restorative Justice Council for quite a while. I now work around the state just doing cases where significant harm has been created. So I'm working with victims and those responsible for harm to bring them together. The value that feels really important to me is compassion, and I'm always really interested in helping others to feel compassion for the people that I work with, whether it's somebody that's harmed or someone who's created harm. And I will pass to Christina.
Thank you, Lynn. Good afternoon, everybody. Christina Cabeza, she, they, ella pronouns. I am the executive director with the Colorado Coalition for Restorative Justice Practices, which is a member organization statewide made up of practitioners, organizations, many practitioners on this call, organizations represented on this call, and supporters of RJ to help create public access to RJ statewide. So my context comes from that kind of level of statewide, similar to Casey on the coalition statewide kind of viewpoint. And part of that is strategic partnerships. And I just want to acknowledge CCASA as one of our strongest collaborators in this endeavor. And so we are here as a testament to that work that we've been doing over the years. Yeah, and so the value that keeps coming to me is generosity. I think everything that everyone's mentioned takes an enormous amount of generosity to show up in a way that's giving that amount of presence. And so, yeah, I offer that up. And I pass it to Robin.
Thank you so much, Christina. I am Robin Sordelet. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Survivor Center Director at the Prosecutors Alliance. We're a national organization, and I have the joyful job of supporting progressive prosecutors across the country in the difficult and complex work of trying to center as many voices as possible in making public safety more possible for us in the future. And the value that I think I hold most dearly in this work is interdependence. You know, I really think a lot about how there is no us and them in this work, and we're in this mess together. And so we have to work together and see each other and recognize each other's humanity in order to really make progress. And thank you so much for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you so much for your introductions, Sharing Circle, folks. I'm going to turn over to Shannon, who's going to do introductions for our listening.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm going to briefly introduce our listening circle for the sake of time. You'll see them on the screen as I introduce them, but I'm going to do brief introductions for the listening circle so that we can get into hearing the stories of the sharing circle, and then you'll hear more directly from our listening circle later. And at the same time, Amelia will have some invitations for our larger reflection circle in the chat to let us know who you are that's listening today. So our listening circle today is made up of 8 wonderful folks who are in decision-making or leadership positions related to policy. The first is Anastasia Cole, who is on the CCASA policy team and also leads CCASA's Survivor Task Force. The core value that guides Anastasia's work is equity. Our second listening circle member is Morgan Schmale. Morgan Schmale is here representing the Civic Canopy, and their core value related to their work in policy spaces is that communities are filled with assets and solutions. Third is Jamie Ray. Jamie supports incarcerated people in legislative advocacy through the group Legislation Inside. Jamie's core value is collaboration and leveraging privilege for liberation. Our fourth listening circle member is Senator Mike Weissman, who represents Colorado's State Senate District number 28. And his core policy value is equality. Fifth is Washington State Public Defender Larry Jefferson, who is a board member for Restorative Approaches to Intimate Violence, or RAIV. When we asked him what his policy value is, he said that he just loves human beings, which is perfect for this space. Next is Jason Starkey, who's the Restorative Practices Coordinator at Jefferson County Public Schools here in Colorado. And his core value in his work is that everything should be done together and nothing should be done to us or for us. Next is Janet Drake, who is the Deputy Attorney General for the Criminal Justice Section in the Colorado Attorney General's office and a board member at COVA, I believe. And her core value of her work is empathy. And last but not least, former state senator for Colorado's District number 26, Lyndon Newell, is here. And the core values for her work that she shared with us are community, interconnectedness, equity, empathy, and compassion. So we're so glad that all of you are here today. These folks are going to be listening so deeply to the stories that are shared, and then later offering all of us their reflections and connections that they see. So we look forward to hearing from you soon. So I'll pass it back to you, Liz, or to Amelia if there's any housekeeping that you need with the reflection circle.
This is Amelia speaking. I'll chime in as we get our pins swapped out, but for the reflection circle, everybody else here tuning in today and joining us, I've posted in the chat in Whova. We invite you also to introduce yourselves in the chat because you are a critical component of this work as well. So to connect with people in the space, you are also invited to please share all of these that you'd like: name, pronouns, geographic location, organization or group that you belong to, and we also invite you to add to the space also a core value that guides your work.
Thank you, Amelia. Wonderful. I apologize. I got those out of order. Oops, nope, back. Okay, we're going to stop sharing now, right? Shannon, help me. Yep.
That's right, Liz.
Thank you. Oops, cancel. Stop sharing. You'd think I'd gotten this down by now. Wonderful. So we are going to start with our sharing circle. So all the sharing circle participants are invited to come on screen. And just a brief reminder of our order. We're gonna start with the local coalition folks first. So Ames, then Chelsea, then Heidi. Then we'll move into our statewide coalition folks. So that's Casey, Christina, and Lynn. Christina and Lynn, you guys figure out which order is best for you all. And then our national coalition folks, that's Robin. Wonderful. So our first invitation for you all, and you'll have about 3 minutes each to answer this invitation. Please share with us a little bit about your efforts to collaborate with other humans, groups, and organizations in the policymaking space using restorative justice values, maybe focusing on a win you are particularly proud of. And we really want to hear more about how restorative justice values drove your work and influenced your work. So with that invitation, I am going to pass it over to Ames.
Let me interrupt you, Ames. I'm sorry. I'm still going to be keeping time for you all in the same way as before. I don't think I'm pinned right now, so I just want to make sure that our sharing circle can still see me. No one else needs to, but you do. Okay, great. Same process. And you have 3 minutes each for this round. Thanks all.
We're really generous. Ames, take it away.
I hope I'll hear the gong at some point, Shannon. So yeah, and I will just name, like, I don't know, from a vulnerability point, I don't really like going first because I like to pick up on what other people are sharing. So maybe I reserve the right to come back at the end and say something for 30 seconds. I don't know. All right. So yeah, so our program with the Inglewood Municipal Court is only about 4 years old. And it started because the stars aligned and we had a newer manager, a brand new a newer mayor, a brand new city manager, and a newer judge. Our Inglewood is the only city in the state that has a an elected municipal court judge. And so between kind of all of those folks coming together and hearing about restorative justice and saying, how do we bring these practices to our community? Lots of interesting intersectional relationships that took place around this person knows this person, and there was some communication between different programs, and And the bottom line was, it was a yes kind of all around for the school district and the municipal court and the police department and the city. Kind of all came together. This was back in 2019 was the first kind of conversation that we had, and then led to I got to be hired as a consultant with the city of Inglewood in 2020, and then we started programming in 2021. So I say all of that because we take cases that would otherwise go through the municipal court. So these are lower level cases, right? Otherwise misdemeanor cases. However, they're the first, hopefully first and only entry point that someone has in the criminal legal system. And so the entry and the opportunity for them to experience restorative justice as a diversion program from going through the courts, you know, can plant some different seeds around how we want to support people and taking accountability for their actions. We take both youth and adult cases, as well as how do we as a community support harm being repaired. And so we do work with harmed parties and people responsible for harm, and we use a RJ model that invites community participation. So we also have a very robust group of community volunteers, over 60 people that are continuing to support the work of restorative justice. And I say all of that because although we take kind of lower level cases, if you will, we know that the people we're interacting with, all of us, right? We have to be trauma informed. We have to be aware that at some level, everyone has experienced some level of harm in our lives. And so we come from that perspective of how do we meet people where they are? How do we be in the sharing of power with folks to make decisions and choose to participate in the program or not? Thanks, Shannon. And really weave in restorative justice practices into all that we're doing. I will say one quick thing is kind of our highlight or accomplishment is that we are about 3 weeks out of sending or signing an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Littleton so that we can continue to take their cases and continue to build within our Tri-City region. So that's been that's been coming through many years, through building relationships, and really, again, working at the speed of trust has been really, really important. I will pass to Chelsea.
Hi there, thank you. So restorative justice principles are kind of at the core of everything that we do. I really try to emphasize with folks that like conflict resolution and calling each other in is central to building power as a queer community, because there really aren't very many bridges to burn in a small rural area. You kind of have to work together, and in order to do that, you have to work through harm that's happened. So I'm going to give an example of a time that we have used restorative justice as a community. It was hard to pick one, but this was the most kind of robust example. So last year we had a man threaten to shoot up the drag show here locally, and it really shook up the community and was very terrifying to people. And Queer Futures kind of stepped in to help people access therapy and facilitate communication between the drag queens and the bar and the police to build a safety plan. And I kind of helped them work through the criminal justice piece of things. And so when I was talking to the performers and those affected about what was justice to them and what they needed, I tried to ask really open-ended questions. And what I heard was that they didn't want to ruin his life. They wanted him to be educated about the queer community. They wanted him to have the opportunity to address some of his biases and hatred. And what I heard there was restorative justice. And so I worked with the DA's office to help them understand like what that is, because that wasn't really a practice that we had up here. And I also worked with Liz and Ames to kind of educate them on that. But a big piece of it was also educating the community, because I found that as soon as I used that language, the buy-in went down. Because there is a stigma associated with restorative justice, right? People think it's woo, it's woke, that he faced less consequences or something. There was a lot of misinformation about how that was chosen as an outcome. But ultimately, we are still in the process of that, and there's been internal conflict that we've had to deal with between the performers and the fans as well, and the people who are impacted, including some really serious stuff like sexual assault allegation, intimate partner violence. And so yeah, it's been difficult, but I have seen it lay the foundation for future cases to be handled with restorative justice, not just within the community, but also within the criminal justice system here. And I will pass it to Heidi.
Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, so kind of similar to Ames, Restorative Denver started about 5 years ago, and we are a partnership with the Denver District Attorney's Office. And so collaboration really has been a huge piece of having restorative justice with these cases. And so really just kind of was thinking through some of those values with this collaboration and what's made it a successful partnership, and thinking through just a lot of relationship building and trusting the other person. Or the other organization. It's really amazing that we have a champion on our system partner. And so being able to like pair with them and with like the nonprofit has just really been a win for us, honestly, just having that, again, system partner champion there to advocate for restorative justice, and also train other attorneys about what is restorative justice, and have someone there that's able to answer questions for them and do those pieces. And so really just thinking through having that relationship has been really helpful for us in that way. We also have been able to have, for example, like quarterly advisory council meetings where we're able to bring in both sides here too, where we have our elected district attorney John Walsh attend, other attorneys, police sergeants, public defenders. And then on the nonprofit side, we have like our volunteer facilitators and community members, a person who's went through the program as a person who caused harm attend as well. And so just bringing in all those different pieces and voices, and again, letting everyone kind of speak, I think has been really helpful in that collaboration of making sure we're bringing the right people into the space to have that conversation. And we talk about what's going well, and we can share statistics and what our recidivism rate is, and just have that conversation. And we can brainstorm maybe what hasn't been going as well. What are we struggling with currently? And let's brainstorm together what that can look like, whether that might be funding or fundraising, and have those conversations in that space has really helped us collaborate. So yeah, so in terms of, I don't know if I have one focus point win, but thinking through, again, really grateful to have the leadership that we do, and having that leadership support has been really helpful. And that's definitely a win. Having that system-based champion partner is a win. And also, we feel like we've seen more felonies come through. At one point, we didn't have as many felonies, and right now we have 85% of our cases are misdemeanors and 15% are felonies. And so we've noticed how certain prosecutors maybe started at the like misdemeanor level, and then they were referring cases, and then when they moved to become felony prosecutors, now they're referring those cases too. And so just that's been a win that we've seen as well.
Awesome. Thank you, local coalition leaders. You're amazing. So inspiring. Now we're going to turn to the state coalition leaders. Casey, would you like to start us off?
I would love to. Thank you for the invitation. Wow, we've actually had a lot of wins since I have joined the Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I will say that the work that Amelia and I are able to do collaboratively for our restorative and transformative justice initiatives has been fundamentally based in building relationship and collaboration. And we've had the opportunity to connect with folks all over the state to build the relationship that we have with the Colorado Coalition for Restorative Justice Practices, and to really connect with folks nationally about what the intersection of restorative practices and sexual harm is looking like. I think it's, in addition to folks maybe not being aware of the opportunity for restorative practices as an option for survivors of sexual harm, figuring out who's doing what and where, I think has been a little bit of a challenge. And so the opportunity to meet folks and then they immediately say like, oh, you need to meet this person who's doing this in this other state has been just a really beautiful way to learn more about the opportunities that really can be available to survivors of sexual harm, and to really broaden the opportunities to upskill. The majority of our membership, I believe, is victim service organization. So how can we help support victim advocates in understanding the potential and possibilities that really do exist for survivors of sexual harm, and especially those who may or may not choose to engage with the criminal legal system, and what supports do we have available for them. The other piece that I think is really neat, and I am just incredibly grateful for the coalition for allowing us to really venture into this, is the work that we're doing sort of in the post-conviction space. In Colorado, there's opportunity for a process called clarification for an individual who is in offense-specific treatment. So that means that they've been sentenced on a sex offense and have gone through the process of understanding and taking accountability for the choices that they've made. There's an expectation that they write a letter of accountability to the person that they harmed, and then there's an opportunity for the harmed party to receive that letter or participate in a dialogue in whatever way feels most comfortable or valuable to them. And sometimes that's not participating at all. But one of the priorities of CCASA has been to figure out how we can extend into those spaces and ensure that the needs of those most impacted by sexual harm are showing up both in the community and within the context in which somebody who's responsible for harm is learning about the impacts of their choices, to ensure that it is individualized to the person that they've harmed and the communities that they're in. And so that's been a really valuable opportunity to be able to extend that training and learning to our membership, and to also step into that sort of tertiary prevention space to ensure that the folks who have chosen to cause sexual harm have the tools that they need to move forward and not make those choices again. So lots of different and very cool opportunities for that. And then to be able to collaborate with folks like Anastasia, who's in one of our concentric circles, as she steps into policy spaces, and to share that information and that learning that we're doing both in the restorative and transformative justice spaces and that post-conviction space as well. I'm going to pass to Lynn or Christina. Do you want to rock, paper, scissors?
Actually, Christina and I already talked, and so we decided I would go first. Yeah, I think I can't talk about policy. I don't usually talk about this, but without recognizing my husband, Pete Lee, who spent 8 years in the legislature. So during that period of time, he and I collaborated a lot on restorative justice initiatives and bills that he brought and passed. I think that his relationships in the legislature were really significant and made a huge difference in being able to pass restorative justice legislation. And that was fun. It was really fun working with him in that way. I wanted to tell you a little story about a win that came about from that collaboration with Pete. I think it was about 2012, but Charlotta Evans had come to me, and her 3-year-old son was killed in a drive-by shooting in Denver. And she wanted to meet with the 2 young men they were 15. They were given life sentences at 15. They were both incarcerated. Pete met with Tom Clemens, and I'm not sure if you all know that Tom Clemens was the DOC director, Department of Corrections director, who was killed by an inmate that was released by mistake. But at that time, Pete met with Tom, and Tom agreed to have 3 restorative justice conferences with victims who had been requesting that and unable to do that, and people who were incarcerated. So Charlotta's was the first restorative justice conference in the Department of Corrections at Lyman Correctional Facility. It took a lot of preparation and about 8 hours of conferencing. But it was really quite remarkable. So that's the kind of work I still do. Sometimes people are released, sometimes they're in the community, sometimes they're in community corrections facilities. Oh, I see Shannon's little thing going up. what I want to say about policy is just because you get a policy passed doesn't mean that it's going to happen. So that feels really important to me. Those collaborations feel really important to me. And the last thing I want to say is Pete had invited other legislators to classes that Liz and I teach together around restorative justice. And when they would come to the prisons with us and meet with those people responsible for usually taking someone's life or meet with victims who had been harmed, I think that that was really instrumental in helping to pass legislation and create understanding and compassion. And I will pass to Christina.
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, I think in the time that I have, I really want to elevate the work that Lynn and Liz and others started with bridging the creating a bridge between our coalitions, between the restorative justice world in Colorado and the advocate in the sexual harm space, those folks, and really forming those relationships and saying, hey, we need to talk. We need to form relationship. We need to know what each other's doing. We need to learn from one another. And so the work I would count for the win is like us being here today. Like this is years in the making. To do a policy circle in partnership took putting forth events together, RJ summits, learning community, cross-training, and all of that has been done with the ethos of restorative and transformative justice to say, we're going to put relationship first. We're going to show up. We're going to be accountable to what we can and can't do. We're going to try and balance bigger forces that may be beyond us, but what can we do in our relating in the work that we're doing, and how can we build impact from those smaller spaces into larger spaces? And so I really want to elevate that and to the best of our ability, right? And so there's been some amazing things that have come from that, mainly a deep respect and love. And so I want to bring in, I think Larry brought in love with people, and that is there no matter what comes. So just want to elevate that, and I will pass it to Robin.
Thank you so much, Christina. And your words there were beautiful segue into what I want to share, which is just so much about, my work building this coalition on a national level is so much about extending invitations to folks who ordinarily are not included in these conversations or assumed to be disinterested in these kinds of conversations. The majority of my work is about creating a learning community for prosecutors and system-based advocates. These are folks who, most people assume are kind of a lost cause for any sort of growth, because legal education is very black and white, and our legal system values efficiency, right? It values productivity. It's a linear process. It's all of the things that restorative justice is not. And so there's been this kind of belief that these things are that, it's an either or. And I have this beautiful opportunity to create this learning community that invites people to be more than a stereotype. And what I do and what I have really am proud of, my organization and my boss, who is such a supporter of this work. And also, like, I'll just give myself a little baby pat on the back, because it's hard work, is to intentionally create this space where, all of the work that we do uses restorative values, right? So we're not talking about, oh, I'm only giving trainings on restorative practices. It's that the space that I'm creating is so different than spaces that prosecutors and system-based advocates are normally invited into, right? I am focused on building relationships with them that exist beyond our 90-minute webinar. I am focused on making sure that they understand that there's no like right or wrong here, that we're all just existing in this together and figuring out together. And also that things can be slow. right? Like I can't tell a judge that. Like I'm not going to go into a courtroom and say that, but that things can be slow. And for me, the win is, you know, these emails that come, and I save them in a little folder in my inbox called the joy folder. These emails that come from the most unlikely of people, you know, people who just were just waiting for an invitation to reimagine their work. And that's a really beautiful thing to be a part of. And to be able to do that on a national level, I think is really exciting, because kind of to go back to what Casey was saying about like that collaboration that's like back and forth pinballing between people everywhere. It's amazing that you would think like there's no way people in Georgia can relate to people in California. And yet, right, the struggle is the same, the work is the same, and the values are the same, and everybody is just like desperate for connection, and they just need the place to land for that. And I get to create that, and like just the best gift, the best work. So yeah, thank you to all of you for the work that you do as well, because it encourages me to keep doing what I do.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you all of you for your share on that first round. As we do in restorative justice practices, we're adapting. So our second invitation, sorry y'all, we're giving you a little less time. We're gonna have 1.5 minutes for answering this invitation. Oh, Ames, apologies. Do I need to circle back with you?
I yield.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm proud of myself for remembering. That's part of, if someone passes, making sure you allow for their voice in this space. So the next invitation for you all is, what has been the most challenging about working from a restorative world view in the policy making space? Yeah. Does that sound, you guys have a sense of what you want to talk about? Perfect. Then I won't share anything more with you. I'll let you guys share. Ames, I know you don't want to kick us off, but
No, that's okay.
okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Liz. It kind of is a perfect segue, I think, from what Robin just shared. One of the biggest pieces that I found the challenges is just working from within different power structures, right? So wanting to invite people, wanting to get consent, wanting people to choose to want to connect and build relationship and take the time to do that in a real way. And yet when we're working with people that's not their orientation, that's not where they're moving from or coming from, at least in the professional sense, or at least in the way that they're doing their work or their activities, it can just kind of like, okay, where it's like a feeling out of where are people, and then trying to meet them where they are, and sharing a little bit about restorative justice, restorative practices, maybe from a values perspective, or like linking it back an example to, oh, this actually connects in this way with restorative practices. So that it's just kind of like planting these little seeds, and then inviting folks to continue to come back to conversation and connection. And I think that if we're not the work, right? If we don't practice the work ourselves, then people are going to be turned off by those conversations and think it's just one more thing where they can get something or they can't get something. But how do we turn kind of our consumerism or into more reciprocity? How do we do that through our language and our relationships and our authentic showing up with one another? So I would just add that, and I will pass to Chelsea.
Yeah, I would echo some of what Ames said, that at least in the case that I was talking about earlier, it was kind of a lack of like community education around restorative justice and that language. And so, for example, we had a lot of competing needs, especially around police presence and involvement. So, for example, like just recently, the drag performers said, you know, we want police at the Pride after party. And the Pride organizers were like, absolutely not. And it created this huge conflict and fallout. And so, you know, what I'm trying to do is offer educational opportunities. Like Liz came up and did a workshop on RJ. We're doing like a film screening about Marsha P. Johnson, so that hopefully folks can like learn like why do some people not want police at a drag show? And we hosted Coffee with a Cop at the Resource Center, which was very controversial, but it was kind of cool. Like the police didn't bring in their firearms, which we found as a sign of respect because that was one of our community agreements. And, you know, if we didn't give them the opportunity to show us that respect, then a lot of relationships, opportunities would have been lost. And I've found, to Robin's point, that you find champions in unexpected places. So somehow, a truck driving cowgirl in our community has ended up being like really invested in restorative justice and rallying people around that concept. And she speaks a language that I don't. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting and I've learned a lot.
Yeah, so if I'm
Sorry,
thinking
passing
through
it to
maybe,
Heidi.
oh no, you're good, I got you. Yeah, so a challenge that that we see sometimes with Restorative Denver, I'm thinking through maybe just like equity of cases, and so thinking about who's always being referred a case and who has the opportunity to have their case resolved through Restorative Denver. Of course, in order for a case to come through, the person harmed has to agree, if there was a person harmed, that they want this case to be resolved in this way. But also whoever their assigned district attorney is also has to decide that they think this is the best fit. And so just kind of thinking through that challenge of making sure that attorneys are on the same page and this is how they think cases should be resolved. And so highlighting that as sometimes a challenge of sometimes referral numbers maybe aren't as high as we would like, and just wanting to make sure that as many people as possible are given this opportunity. On the flip side of that, though, what was exciting a year and a half ago is that we did start a program called Restoring Responsible Gun Use. And this was actually an agreement that was made where anyone that had a misdemeanor gun possession charge, it was either reckless use of a gun or carrying a weapon without their permit, as long as certain criteria was met, they automatically had the option to have restorative justice. And so that was just a really cool win that we saw, and just a way that we were able to see this given more equitably to people. And as long as you meet this criteria, you do have RJ as an option. And so always just kind of working through that challenge and what that can look like in different ways. And I'll pass to, I think it was Casey.
Thank you. I'm going to echo a bit of what Ames said and then kind of go off on my own tangent. But I think oftentimes we find ourselves working in different power structures, and especially when it comes to issues like funding and finding the resources that we need to ensure that this work continues in a sustainable way, often puts us in places where the tenets that compose restorative practices, like Robin said, sometimes it's slow, and we need to be vulnerable, and there's connection, and there's a bunch of pieces that I think are fundamental to restorative practices that are sort of antithetical to a lot of the spaces that necessitate collaboration. And frankly, we want to bring everyone in, right? And so there's a lot of education and connection that needs to happen in order to have those conversations, in order to educate folks about why funding for this work is important, in a way that I think is very different and can sometimes cause discomfort for folks who aren't used to being in some of these spaces. And how do we meet in the middle in a way that doesn't feel like we're minimizing or setting aside the values that are so important to this work. And we're calling folks in to find further opportunities for collaboration, and on a timeline that's unfortunately sometimes expedited. It needs to be expedited for us. And sometimes folks need time to understand the connection to the work that they're doing, because it is and feels so different to what they're used to I think Robin's point earlier, and finding opportunities for that connection can sometimes take time. And I think in a world where funding is really important and crucial, how are we doing that? And I think that's been sort of a challenge for us too. I'm going to pass it to the CCRJP folks. Lynn?
Thank you, Casey. A minute and a half. So for me, this question could take a day and a half to answer. I think in all of the time that I've been working in restorative practices, there are challenges every case I work on, every institution I work with, even if there are private referrals, and I get those sometimes. So I think there are multiple challenges. And I also think what's really important for us as practitioners is to be really persistent and try to find a way around those challenges. Liz is really good at that. So, okay, we can't do it that way. Maybe we can do it another way. And I think there are always other opportunities to try to approach a situation. I think we meet those challenges in part because restorative justice is so different from any system, whether it's an education system, a legal system, whatever system we're working in. When I think about that, I think about how important it is to invite people into our processes as much as we can. Because I think that's the way people will understand. We could talk to we're blue in the face, but what really makes the difference is participating and being there. The other thing that feels really important for me to always remember is no matter what the barriers or the challenges are, there will always be people, victims, survivors, people who've been harmed, who are not served by the system that they're specifically in, the education system or the legal system. And there is always a place for us to try to help them get their needs met and begin a healing process. So that's really what keeps me in there in spite of all of the challenges that I face. And I don't know, Shannon, if your little things went up. I did. Wow. Should have done that a minute ago. Go ahead, Christina.
Maybe 15 seconds over.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn. I really feel what you're saying. And I really want to reiterate what's been brought up a couple times about the urgent speed at which our work has been conditioned to go culturally, society, systematically, and the contrast between restorative practices and restorative ways of doing things. And so, yeah, the challenge in that is what happens when things speed up. Misunderstanding, harm, the impact to communication and is a lot of what I see happen over and over again. And so how do we slow it down is the challenge. And I just want to elevate in the chat real quick. Alice Price, and this relates because Alice is a partner in policy work on the state level with us as a RJ council member and also a coalition member, not as a challenge, not being invited to be in direct dialogue with those who are opposing a policy initiative, despite requests for connection. The speed in which policy work happens really leaves it causes the harm because that partnership building is on a timeline that is antithetical a lot of times to relationship building and what it takes and what it means. And so our approach with that challenge to meet that is to say, step back and we're going to slow it down. We may not be as productive, but are we not productive? We're focusing on these things that have more longevity. So just wanted to say that, and now I'm going to pass it to Robin.
Thank you, Christina. I'm going to go in a different direction when I think about the challenges. And this is something that I struggle with when we start diving into policy discussions, whether it's on a small scale or where, we start talking about the, legislative priorities that we may have, whether it's my organization or our partners, is trying to make sure that folks who want to engage survivors and people with lived experience understand what meaningful empowerment is. And so really doing everything we can to steer clear of tokenizing survivors and asking them to share often the worst thing that has ever happened to them without being invited to have a real seat at the table. And this is something that I really struggle with. And I'm working really hard to prioritize this shift. And this doesn't just include people who have been harmed, but people who have caused harm as well, right? We really want these beautiful before and after stories. We love those narratives, but what kinds of work are we doing to make sure that that person is protected and cared for, and isn't just called up the day of and handshake and escorted out. So that's a challenge I have right now in this work for sure.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, everyone who shared in that. So important for us to talk about the challenges so that we recognize we're not alone in those challenges, and then we can start building solutions. Okay, one last round for you all. It's going to be a lightning round. For those who don't know what a lightning round is, I am really terrible at them. I'm going to ask you all to keep it to about one sentence, and I know that's really hard. So do as best as you can. Your invitation is, as you imagine what's possible, what is one bold dream that you have for restorative justice policy making? Shannon will again remind you if you start going beyond a couple sentences. Thank you. Ames, take it away.
I'll do my best. So first, that we have policies that acknowledge, address, and support the repair of first and second harms. That's a phrase coined by Edward Belandra. First harm of stealing land, second harm stealing of people and culture. Comma, colon, I don't know, all youth be diverted from municipal court programs or municipal court to go to restorative justice practices across the state, colon, including restorative justice training in the peace officer standards and training requirements. Thank you, Heidi. Or sorry, Chelsea.
How do I follow that? I just said funding for community-based restorative justice programs that don't involve institutions like courts and schools, and offer the flexibility to fund things like community education. Heidi.
Restorative justice offered more equitably and to more people, and to people that are willing to take accountability. Oh, you went in one sentence. Casey.
Oh God, mine's just a combo of Chelsea and Heidi, and that is just equitable and accessible and comprehensive restorative practices for folks who are wanting and willing to engage. Lynn.
Every victim who would like to have a process with the person who harmed them or their family member would be informed and able to have a process. Christina.
My big dream is that the need for a connected way becomes so necessary and glaring that we create these new agreements and these new norms as policy, as how we conduct that, in the vein of nothing about us without us, on a deeper and deeper and deeper level. Robin.
Big table, comfortable seating, good snacks for everybody. Anybody who wants it, anyone who wants to be in that room.
You all are so amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your amazing contributions to making the world a better place. And thank you for sharing all of the hard work you have been doing, wins, challenges, and your bold visions for the future with everyone. Really lovely and inspirational. We are going to take a 15-minute break. Is that correct, Shannon?
I believe that is correct.
Okay. We are taking a
leave. As part of our commitment to language justice, we have a break for our interpreters, so as to make sure that they get some space. And then we're going to be back. Also, like, our listening circle is going to be just steeping in all this that they've just heard and getting ready to share their reflections. So
15-minute break, then we'll be back on here. We're not going anywhere. We may shut cameras down, but we'll be here and come back to hear from our listening circle, our policy leaders, share their reflections about what they just heard. Thank you. Slowly bringing folks back into this space for our listening circle. Those of you who shared, I think you're off the hook for video for the next little bit. Shannon, correct me if I Casey's like, please, wonderful. But I'm glad to know you're here, Lynn and Casey and Christina. Larry, wonderful. Janet, Amelia, back on.
Yeah, and I think our organizers are going to be getting our listening circle folks with the asterisk pinned up for you to see. So while that's happening, I'll go ahead and get started introducing the next round. This is Shannon speaking. Welcome back. And we've just spent about 35, 40 minutes listening to folks in our sharing circle, folks from the field talking about their collaborative and restorative efforts and policy work and what's difficult and what's exciting and what's hopeful about that. And the whole purpose of the policy circle is that we center those folks and then we invite a ring of people to listen deeply. And those are people who are in leadership positions, decision-making positions, doing policy-making work in some capacity, and wanting to hear what sort of insights and wisdoms that you're deriving from what you're hearing and what else that it's making you think about that you want to add. So as we hear from this circle, I'm going to be offering you 2 prompts. The first one, you'll have about 2 minutes to answer each, and I'll continue to time as I have in the prior round. So you'll see my little hourglass when you have like 30 seconds left. And then if you don't wrap up soon thereafter, you might hear the gong. And then we'll do a final lightning round with you all as well. So that's the plan. As a reminder for those here, I think someone may pop the speaking order in the chat, but it'll be Anastasia, Morgan, Jamie, Mike, Larry, Jason, Janet, and Linda. If you forget who's next, don't worry, I'm here to help. So we're gonna start off with Anastasia, and I'm gonna give you the first prompt, which is to please just share at least one new connection you made or insight that you had while listening to our sharing circle today, one or more than one. And again, you'll each have about 2 minutes to share. So I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Anastasia. Thanks for having me in this space. Just want to really quickly start off by saying thank you to all the practitioners and experts in this space. I was introduced to RJ really in my first couple weeks in CCASA, and it has been a transformational experience for me. So grateful for this, this conversation today. I could also talk all day. I'll try to keep it short within the time limit. I think that one insight that I had that really I think resonates with a lot of experiences is that it is inherently difficult to work within our current systems as they have been formed. I feel like they have been designed to be inaccessible by nature. And then when you're bringing RJ principles and values into that space, I think that what I'm hearing is that there is an inherent conflict. I think that also one thing that I heard continuously, it was the importance of relationship building over time. One thing that really stood out to me, I think it was Christina who said that, or maybe Lynn, I apologize, that there can be a challenge with how quickly the process goes. I think especially as we prep to get into our legislative session in Colorado with our 120-day limit, that things can move really quickly. And I think that in that process that voices are excluded from the table, there's probably harm caused not only in this space, but in many others. And so one insight that I am taking away from this is just really the need to really deeply slow down and be reflective and to recognize that the type of change that we're working towards doesn't happen overnight. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but that it is important, and building that trust. Thank you. Building that trust is, is not a quick process, so that it's important to continue showing up in community and also meeting folks where they're at. I think even for my own experience coming into this space, all the RJ stuff was very foreign to me, but so grateful for all the things that I've learned in people's patience. And I think that would be my offering, is to continue to have patience and invite people in, even if they're not where we all are right now, with our commitment to this work. Thank you. And I will pass it to Morgan.
Hello, everyone. I have 3 minutes. Is that it? 2 minutes. Okay. Oh my goodness. So many nuggets of wisdom that were shared. And I think something that is coming up for me is just the sort of binary that can emerge that seems between the world of RJ and restorative justice practitioners, and then the folks who are seemingly against that, or might be assumed to be against a different way of being. And I'm leaving with some curiosity or questions of, like, what are the spaces where we can break down that binary and be able to actually come to a place where true collaboration is possible, where folks in the restorative justice space can hear from the folks who are working deeply within a system that has worked that way forever and was built to work that way. And yeah, I'm just curious how we can create almost like third spaces, or spaces that aren't rooted in either one of those camps, but a different third space altogether, where folks can see new possibilities emerge. And I'm not a policymaker or a decision maker, I must say. So yeah, I'm a process person. So hopefully we can dream about that together. And I saw my little time. Thanks, Shannon.
Jamie, you're up.
Hi, well, thank you guys again, like everybody else said, for having me today. And sorry, I have to remind myself to talk slow. I talk extremely fast. So I'll take breaths and promise to talk slow through this. But as many of you know, it's on the inside of, I represent a program called Legislation Insight inside the Department of Corrections. And I'm so thankful to be here today. I work with around 37 incarcerated individuals across 13 facilities, and we meet and talk about policy every day, just like this, or sorry, every Wednesday, just like this, on Zoom across the state. And this year, what's kind of important, I think, to point out in this group, and what I'm going to follow up and say later, is we were blessed enough to pass a bill that allowed us to have an interim committee in the summer. So we will now have those 37 incarcerated reps be able to meet with a committee of legislators and offer 3 bill ideas that could possibly turn into law in the future. So it's something we're really excited for, as far as we know, first in the nation of really having directly impacted people work directly with senators and representatives. And with that, something my men and the women inside always say, and this kind of reinforced, is how much like ripple effects these different issues have. And I think RJ spans across this. And that's one thing that I really pulled out and learned today is I have been just in the prison world for so long. I know I often get blinded with just, prison reform, and then often forget how many other things lead into prison reform and how many of these silos cross over. And the big one, with education in our youth is one of them. So much of my career has been focused in adults, and I often just forget how important it is to expand that policy mind of, like, how do we start in other places, right? Not only how do we support youth restorative justice, but how do we use adults who have been through this process and who have really taken on this process, and how do we use them to bridge this gap with youth and in youth courts and youth restorative justice, and really continuing to partnering across it with education, youth courts, and adult corrections. So I appreciate you all for having me and all the wisdom you shared. And I will pass it, I believe, to Senator Wiseman.
Hi, everyone. Man, 2 minutes. It's hard to organize all the things I want to comment on here. I think, what I'll say for now is just what a reminder the whole sharing circle was. Frankly, well, all right, I'll save that for later. I'll go this way. I think one of the reasons that I've come to appreciate RJ over the many years, and by the way, I want to acknowledge, I sort of apprenticed with one of the masters. I had the privilege to serve on House Judiciary Committee with Pete Lee, Lynn's husband, and then I followed him as chair in the House. I'm now on the Senate side. But, RJ invites us to reconsider some of the very biggest questions that I think are not even considered and the answers to which are assumed around here, as fundamental as what is public safety. The prevailing assumption in this building anyway is, well, public safety is law enforcement officers, patrolling the community and making arrests, and then DAs file charges and people do time in DOC. And then, they come out and they don't do it again and everyone is sort of magically fine. And the DOC budget is $1.2 billion. And, all of that is exactly what survivors want all of the time. I think we know that's not the case. Relatedly, what is justice? Well, okay, it's all of that. It's people doing time, and yet people, need to do time sometimes. It's interesting, the terminologies that we use. When I started here in the House in 2017, we all said, even people sort of left of center, like I am, would say criminal justice system. And I think as the recognition grew that there's not always justice, we pivoted the terminology. And now a lot of us say, at least some of the time, criminal legal system. It very certainly is that. Whether or not there's justice in it, depends on the perspective and maybe the individual case. A powerful example of all of this was an attempted bill on RJ last session, 2024. It was 1101. A lot of the folks here were very close to it or testified at the hearing. It didn't become law. It surfaced a really, really deep split in terms of the appropriateness, the potential power of restorative mechanisms. A lot of folks here supported it, and I know probably helped develop it. And there were opposed voices too, and ultimately the sponsors asked for it to be postponed indefinitely. That's sort of legislative parlance for we're not going to go any further right now. So that did not come back this year. We'll see where the future goes. I'm out of time.
Hi, my name's Larry Jefferson. In addition to being a board member for RAVE, I'm also the Director of Public Defense for the state of Washington. And I guess what I want to say is what I saw today here was hope. What I saw here today was a chance and an opportunity to heal. And far too often in our system, we don't get those opportunities. I can come in as an attorney on a case and I can win that case. I can win a domestic violence case. I can win 50 to 60% of them. But winning does not mean that a family is healed. Winning does not mean that someone is healed or listened to or any of those things, and that there is a trauma from being cross-examined by a defense attorney. There's a trauma from having to go into a courtroom. So what I heard here is that government can have a place when partnered with community to create spaces that are healing, spaces that are equitable. And it doesn't always have to be at a courthouse. It could be anywhere, a synagogue, a church, a bowling league. Humans, it turns out, hurt other humans wherever they're at. And so what we need to do is learn different ways and mechanisms all the way throughout our lives where we can do this thing where we love each other and sometimes we hurt each other. But what I've found is I've never met an evil baby, but I have met babies that were traumatized. I have met those that were hurt and they want to get on their path to healing. And so those are some of the things that I saw. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Starkey. I'm the Restorative Practices Coordinator in Jeffco Public Schools. I heard a lot of, I would echo a lot of what we just heard among our listening circle here is that, I hear a lot about relationships. I hear a lot about providing opportunity for people to access restorative process. And what we try to do at the school level, because I know a lot of the time, we're talking about what happens when people are already quote unquote in trouble, right? They're in the system, things like that. And so what we really try to do is really provide that equitable access to restorative justice practices within our schools, not only on the responsive side, but on the proactive side as well. Larry, I love what you just said around trauma. It's one of those things where our students have experienced a lot of trauma. Our communities have, our world has. I mean, this little thing called COVID that just happened, right? I mean, I'm thinking about all these different traumas and the skills that now lack because of the lack of engagement that students had with one another. Speaking again to that relationship piece. And so what happens when harm happens in our schools? And so we really try to make sure that within the school system, we are providing opportunities for students to understand what the impact of their behavior is, and really the opportunity to be reintegrated back into the community so they feel a sense of belonging. We all make mistakes. We all make poor choices. Kids are no different. The thing is that a lot of the time, they just don't have the fully developed brain that we do, right? And so we provide opportunities to learn through discipline. I'm really happy to report that this last year, our restorative conferences went up 43 percentage points than the year before. We're really trying to make sure that in our schools we're providing these opportunities to make sure that students can engage in the process, so that they can learn through the process. I know that sometimes we all want, so a lot of people want that quote unquote pound of flesh when something happens, right? Well, the thing is we need to provide opportunities to learn. It's not the absence of consequence, please understand that. But our exclusionary discipline is way down, meaning suspensions and expulsions are way down, and our restorative conferences are way up. And so that's a really great thing to hear that is going to continue through the system. And thank you for your time. This is amazing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janet Drake. I'm the Deputy Attorney General for the Criminal Justice Section. And I want to start by thanking everyone in the sharing circle. All of you are such great leaders and have really dedicated a lot of energy and time in the space. And I'd like to pull on a thread that Liz started us off with, talking about how RJ is broader than any one system. Before this circle, I was often thinking about restorative justice in a kind of limited way for people who are involved in the criminal system. And as a prosecutor, and also as someone who's standing as the president of the Colorado Organization for Victim Assistance, I get worried about the imbalance of power as I perceive it on behalf of a survivor of crime. And when I try to broaden my perspective and bring empathy and trust into the space, I realize that people who are justice involved on the defense side are also worried about the perception of an imbalance of power because of the way prosecutors approach a case and have a big team of law enforcement and other resources, et cetera. So I really appreciate the optimism and the collaborative nature of the discussion today and the bringing together of all the leaders, leaders in the sharing circle and such esteemed leaders in this listening circle. I really feel honored to be invited to be included. And I pledge to you that I will continue to show up with empathy and try to continue the hard work of building relationships, building trust, and making positive progress in our systems. Thank you. I feel complete, and I will pass the talking piece to Senator Linda Newell.
Thank you, Janet. I too want to acknowledge the people not only in this circle, whom many I have worked with before, but also the sharing circle and all of the people in the reflection circle who have not yet been able to speak and contribute because we are all humans. And it's just it's a brilliant way to be able to lift up everybody's voices. What I heard today was things that really helped me with my persistence and resilience. To Lynn Lee's point, actually, I worked with her and Senator Pete Lee and Rep. Pete Lee when he was in the House, doing much of the RJ legislation. It does not mean, once you get something into statute, it does not mean that it is working. And so I think that's a really good point. And I think it was Lynn who mentioned that we need to go back once something is in statute and look at the implementation, the rulemaking, the budgeting, et cetera. So following through after your big win is really important. One of my key learnings when I did the zero tolerance in school discipline legislation, which was the first in the country. Actually, we were able to remove zero tolerance, but then you find out it wasn't really in practice working. But one of the key elements for that for me was slowing down the process. It took me almost 3 years to get that into statute with 64 collaborators. I used to call them stakeholders. And that was very difficult and unwieldy, but very important to do. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is the relationship piece, relationships with communities, with bringing in all of the voices that you possibly can, and remembering those empty chairs of people who cannot be there.
Thank you so much, everyone. I I heard a lot about trauma and recognizing the role of trauma, and I know I and some others in my communities of practice have been thinking a lot about the way that we're all impacted by this and reading What It Takes to Heal by Prentice Hemphill. And I think she says in that book that we need collective spaces because what we have to grieve is too big to grieve alone. Liz is demoing her copy. So a lot of times what I feel in these spaces is just that we're not alone. Like we sometimes think that we're doing this work alone, but there's actually a lot of us who are doing it side by side. And I know one thing that I'm committed to is just trying to create spaces where we can be together to know we're not alone in the work. So we want to do one more round with our policy circle as we close, kind of like our listening circle, like we did with our sharing circle. That's kind of a lightning round. So get your little one sentence. It can have a colon in it or two. And what we want to invite you to share is just one commitment or offering that you can make to build trust and collaboration or to do restorative work in policy or decision-making spaces. Thinking of that broadly, right? I know some of you said, oh, I'm not a lawmaker, but one commitment or offering you can make to build this spirit of collaboration and working together in those policy or decision-making spaces. And yes, we'll go back to Anastasia to start.
Thank you. Appreciate that. One commitment I have, I want to go back to equity, which is the value that I brought into this space. Equity is important to me personally. It's also really important to my organization, CCASA. I think that as we're all working towards collective progress and relationship and power building, part of that is making as this is policy circle, part of that is making the legislative process accessible. So something that I would like to offer to this group is I just want to say that I personally, in my role at CCASA and our team, want to be a resource and a thought partner in this space. I came into the policy space just a few years ago. I'm younger, a few younger, always felt like wanted to get in that space, but found it to be very inaccessible and have had my own powerful journey through that. So just want to offer this to that group of if you're not sure where to start or you have questions, just want to be a partner and a resource in that. Sometimes I'll have folks reach out and they're like, I know this is a silly question. There are no silly questions. And in my role at CCASA, I get, have responsibility over our policy initiatives alongside Elizabeth. So just want to continue to make that accessible and also continue building our collective table. And I will pass it to Maureen.
Thank you, Anastasia. Mine's kind of similar. I would say that I can commit to a thought partnership. And part of what I may have not shared is that the Civic Canopy is a statewide nonprofit who we really see ourselves as experts in what makes collaboration possible. So what makes collaborative processes successful. So And I see policy as one piece of that, right? Like we talked about how implementation and follow through and all the things that have to happen before, during, and after a process need to be considered. So, if you find yourself knowing that you need to collaborate with others, but not really knowing where to start, or maybe even in the middle and running into some roadblocks, I think the Canopy and myself specifically would love to be a resource for you. So I hope we have a way to share our contact information, and even if it just looks like grabbing coffee, or having a phone call, I would love to talk through it with you.
I'm next, right, Shannon?
Yes.
Okay. So similar to what others have said, I think at the very beginning, Christina, I think it was brought up like the speed and everything. So, and others have said that. And to go along with that, that's something that we experience. So I think the first commitment would, on behalf of Legislation Inside and the incarcerated people that I'm here representing, of making sure that we are collaborating with survivors groups ahead of time as much as possible, and really making sure that these groups are deeply embedded in the work that we do. So as the speed of the legislature moves, we have confidence in our relationship and knowledge about what, these different groups of survivors are looking for and how we fit in that space. And then same as everybody else, offering that group as a resource is, this is a really big interest of our guys inside, and they really have a lot of care and appreciation for restorative justice and the work that you guys are doing, and figuring out how they fit in these spaces to show the accountability and remorse that often comes with incarceration. So I, offer that group to you all, as we love having different groups in, we love having community in. I love bringing anybody I can on these meetings to meet face to face with these incarcerated folks, and I'd offer that all to you if you want to get that kind of involved in that relationship going. Please reach out, and we would love to have you guys. And I'll pass it to Senator Wiseman.
Okay. A lot of folks have really said it. Everything we talked about in terms of the fundamentals, this place is sort of 540 degrees, the opposite, not just around, but a full spin around. And then, that's how screwed up it is. I didn't make note of who was putting it what way, but, partnership building happens on a timeline, that may be antithetical to the speed of things. I mean, that's this place, or moving at the speed of trust. I would say this place, especially in March, April, and the first part of May, operates at the space of panic. The way I think it was Chelsea put this is that there are not many bridges to burn in a small rural community like the Yampa Valley. Frankly, the capital environment is a pretty small community. There's 100 legislators who have the extraordinary privilege to have an edit button on the statutes. I do think relationships among the 100 of us who are that privileged do matter, because I think that they can impact policy sometimes. They certainly shouldn't, not in a negative way. So with all of that, and building on some thinking I've been doing come out of this session anyway, commitment I'm going to try to make here is just to slow all of that down, and to sort of acknowledge not just sort of the exigency of getting the next, task done, but the deeper stuff that is how policy changes, even beyond the space of a legislative session. And I will extend that to folks here and others I may encounter in this realm.
Hey, this is what I got out of this. I got 40 new best friends just right now. And with those 40 new best friends, what I will say is that you're way ahead of Washington with everything that you're doing. So I'm going to be trying to invite you sometimes to come here via Zoom, all those ways to talk to people here in Washington so they can get what you have. The other thing that I'll say is that when I show up to something like this, I want to see more people that I don't know your backgrounds. And so some of you could be indigenous, some of you could be Black. I don't know that right now. And so when I'm talking about issues of equity, I'd like to see more of that when I show up to these types of spaces. I don't know if there's another Black guy on here, but I bet there's Black guys that live in Colorado. And they should be on here. Black women should be on here, indigenous women. And maybe they are, and I just say that because the harm, at least for my people, after the Civil War and after 1877, when my grandmother was born, domestic terrorism has been happening to my people, and it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. Yet all the males in my family were in the armed services, except for me. So we love this country. And we just want to be loved. And I think everybody does too. Thanks.
Awesome. I think there's a lot of commitments, but if I to boil it down to one sentence, I'll give it a shot. I will definitely commit to being open to all those partnerships and would love to continue to learn from the collective brilliance that is here, and would love to extend the same to everybody. Is if you're ever curious about the way we do this in, like the K-12 space and here in Jefferson County, more than happy to have conversations, lunches, coffees, Zoom calls, whatever that may look like, so that we can continue to push this great work forward. So thank you all for your openness and your commitment to this. It's amazing.
This is Janet Drake, and again, as a prosecutor at the Attorney General's office, I sort of am questioning how I fit in and how I can contribute and make a positive difference. And so I want to go back to the Sharing Circle's One Bold Dream reflections. And Ames Stenson mentioned youth diversion and post, I think she was saying, or they were saying post needs RJ training. And in my current role, I supervise the Colorado Peace Officer Standards and Training. So I think there's a great opportunity for me to weave some of that information into the academy redesign work that we're doing in our office. Ames, I would love to talk with you further, and all of you in the sharing circle, the listening circle, and all the other circles. I've really opened myself to you and invite you to reach out if there's something I can do to advance the work that you're working on. And with my empathy and gratitude, I will pass the talking piece to Senator Linda Newell. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. I guess I'll go with that dream too, where I believe I am a resource that can be used, not abused, but can be used for whatever organization needs me, or whatever effort needs me in RJ, TJ conflict, however that, it can serve the best. As an older white cis straight woman, I need to, it is my responsibility to contribute in any way that I can be, from a backseat perspective, not as a leader, but from a supportive perspective. So if there's anything that could help with the legislative process, I have a very short documentary you're welcome to use about the legislative process, or if there's anything that that I can help contribute from my past experiences that worked or did not work, then I'm happy to help with that. But my big dream is, I'm with Larry on this. I believe it's far beyond institutions. I believe it's beyond not only institutions that we're building, that have built already, but that we are building now. It's also living restoratively. And the writing that I'm doing now is about living restoratively. And how can we each do that in our society? We are all interconnected. We are all interdependent. And how can we possibly love each other if we don't believe that we are interconnected? Everything we do has an impact on somebody else. And if I can contribute in a restorative and transformative way, then I believe that I'm doing my life's work and helping society. So that's my dream.
Thank you so much to our listening circle. I heard lots of uplifting of those voices of the people who might be in our empty chair, Black folks, Indigenous folks, calls to expand the circle, connections that people want to make and plan to make and hope to make. And I know one thing we'd like for you to do, I'm going to see Amelia, if you want to say anything to our reflection circle, just inviting them to put things in the chat, but we're hoping people will make lots of connections today before you leave. Is that right?
This is Amelia, and exactly what you said. There have been wonderful contributions in the chat, folks connecting there and also connecting to the folks in the sharing and listening circles. And I hope that everybody hated having 2 minutes to talk, because the great news is after we get off of Zoom, we can all keep talking. We can call each other, we can connect. So I would just invite folks in the chat, folks on the call, to utilize any of the facilitators here today if you want to be able to get in touch. We will also send out emails connecting you all, and to continue to widen that circle. Like, let this be the beginning of many, many conversations, starting today, not ending today. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. Listening circle folks, leaders in our communities, policymakers in all the different ways that we can conceive of policy, as well as our sharing circle folks who are doing incredible work on the ground every day. Thank you so much for sharing your voices with us, sharing your experiences with us, and what's important on your heart. Thich Nhat Hanh says the greatest gift you can give another being is your presence. And so for everyone who is here today, the Reflection Circle, our community at large, as well as those who were not able to be here, it's just so important to keep making those connections, and we really appreciate it. And those who were present, thank you for giving us the best gift you could have done, possibly. And finally, oh, and I was supposed to start sorry, one last thing. And many trees grow from a common root system underground. Our one being reaching up in many bodies: birch, ash, mangrove. Oak trees wrap their roots around each other under the earth. Symbiotic, stronger together rather than divided. That's Hannah Sassaman. Thank you so much for participating in our policy circle. Please continue making those connections with one another, and let's change this world together. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our speakers, our presenters, our listeners, our facilitators, everyone who was involved in this call. As a reminder, the link for the session evaluation, if it hasn't been put in the chat yet, it will soon. Otherwise, it is also located in the bottom of the session description on the agenda, so you can find it there. Please do fill out that information for us. And we'll see you all back here tomorrow when our sessions begin at 9 a.m. Thank you all.